We're going to touch upon 5 topics: how to upload files to ASP.NET, how to store an image in a database using EF Core, how to use background services with a file watcher, and how to set up JBT authorization and resource filters. Just a heads up, this is not a code along. I will not go into depth with each feature, but I will provide links in the description so that you can do your own research. This video is primarily targeted intermediate developers and also beginners that want to dip their toes into some more advanced ASP.NET Core stuff. If any of this sounds interesting to you, then keep watching. There's also timestamps in the description if you just want to jump to a specific section. Just know that the way I have structured this project and the practices that I have applied are not necessarily something you would do to an enterprise application, but it's a great start for the intermediate and beginner developer. Before jumping straight into code, let's just take a look at the application we're going to build. So we have articles and users. We can get a single article, we can delete an article, we can get all the articles in the database, we can create articles, and we can get articles as paged to improve performance if you have a lot of articles. We can create a user, we can get information about the logged in user, we can log in a user, and we can upload a profile image that will get picked up by a background service and grayscaled, and then we can view the profile image after. Profile image is stored in the database using EF Core. So let's just go through some of these. So now we have a user and we can check if the user is logged in. We are not, we get a 401 unauthorized. We can then log in the user. There's no real security in this. We'll just get a token for this specific user. And let's authorize it with Swagger. And if we try to get information about the user again, we get a response back this time, 200 with the information. And you can see we have no articles. And if I just create a few articles for this user. Okay, so now we have a bunch of articles. We can see all the articles. So here we have them. And we can also get this in CSV. So here we go. And then we only get some of the properties, and this is due to our output formatter that I'll also show in the code. And we can also get a page result for the articles, and this is 0 based. So let's just take 2 from the very first page. You can see we get 2. Let's get 5. And I know we have 6. So let's go to page 2 or 1 it is. Get this, then we get that one. We can also upload a profile image. This is then stored on the server, and we have a background service that will pick it up and process it. There we go. So here's the project that we will work with. It has a bit of everything: controllers, models, a database, repositories, output formatters, even custom exceptions, and a background service. Let's look at the models first. They will be at the very center of our application. We have a user, and the user basically just has a username, profile image, and a list of articles. And the article is just the content of the article and a publish day. Then we have a bit more with the CSV property names down here and to CSV, but I will get into that later. Then we also have an entity base, which is just the base class of the article and user with an ID. And we have the iSerializable, which is, or iCSV serializable, which is just get the property names that we would like to use in a CSV file and get the object as a CSV. So let's take a look at our database. We just have the users and the articles, and then we have a few repositories, and we have a repository base. It just provides a few CRUD-based methods that the other repositories will get when they inherit this one. It will operate on a generic type, and that will be a type of entity base. So that will be the user and article. It will just have a DB connection and then this CRUD-based interface. But notice that when we get a user, or when we get an article or user, just any entity base, if it's not found in the database, then we throw this custom entity not found exception. And that is a custom one that I've defined. It's not something from the ASP.NET or .NET library. And that is essentially, there's not really anything crazy going on here. But let's take a look at the article repository. So here we are inheriting from this base repository, and we just define one extra method, get paged, which is essentially used if you have a lot of articles or a lot of entities, then you would want to page them to improve performance. In this case, we're not going to have a whole lot, so I've just set the page limits to 5 because it's not really relevant. But this is one approach to paging your result sets. Then we have the user repository, and this time we're doing the exact same with inheriting from the repository base, but this time we also override the get because a user may have some articles. So what I do here is we get the user, and then we get all the articles, load them into the user, and then we return it. So next up are the controllers, and we're gonna start with the articles controller. So this one, there's not really a whole lot to it. We will just get a single article, and if it's not found, then we catch the exception and we return not found. For oral articles, there's a bit more to this one. So we can get the result in either JSON or CSV. I'll show you how that is done later. And then we have the paged one, as you saw before in the page repository. So we just take these two parameters, page and limit, and pass it on to the page and get the result sets from there. And we have a create method to create new articles, and notice this one, it's not the article, it's a DTO, which essentially just describes, okay, so what is the bare minimum you need to create an article. For the last one, we have a delete, so nothing special about that. Then we have the users controller. This one is slightly different. So first up, we can create a new user, which is very, very basic. It's just with the username, that's all. We don't use passwords in this application. Then we have a me, so that's essentially just like get the information about myself, and it's protected with the authorize. So we need to log in first before we can actually call that one. And to log in, so essentially we'll just pass back a JVT, and you can use that one in your next request to get the me. But let's see how this is implemented. So first of all, we'll just check, is this user actually, does it exist? And if it doesn't, then let's just throw this not found. Otherwise, we'll grab the auth private key that I have defined in app settings. So right here, or actually it's defined inside the dev one because that one is not committed to Git. Never commit your app settings to Git with credentials in. Very important. Okay, so we grab that key, create a signing credentials, get the bytes from the key to use for the signing credentials. We have one claim for the user ID, and we're going to use that one in up here in the get. You see we look into the claims, user ID, and then we grab the user and we pass it back. So anyway, back to the login. So we have these claims, and we will compose the JVT here, and then we will use this JVT security token handler and write out the string so that we can pass it back to the client. All right, so that is how login works. If we go into this upload profile image, so here there's a bunch more. It's not really that complicated, but you do need to do some checks and stuff. Like you need to check how big the file is. In this case, I don't want any files that are larger than 1 megabyte. If the file is of correct size, then we'll just check, okay, so is this staging directory, does that exist on the server? If it doesn't, then we create it. We will grab the file extension, and then we will build this new file name. So it will essentially be like the user ID, and then some GUID, and the file extension, that would be like whatever. And then we save the file to our staging folder, and we close the stream. That's actually how you handle file uploads in ASP.NET Core. So it's super simple. You just need iForm file and then do some operations on that and save it. So the saving actually happens right here, where you will you'll look into the stream of this iForm file, and then you will save it to wherever. You could also just get it into memory, or like do whatever you want to. And we have the view profile image. So after we have saved it, we can view it. Or actually, that's not true. We will save it in the staging directory, and then we'll have a background service that I will describe as one of the last things. But we will have a background service that will pick up this new file, grayscale it, so it will take out all the colors, so it's just black and white, and then it will upload this black and white picture. And to get the profile image, here we grab the user that we are requesting the profile image for. We use the byte array and say, okay, this byte array is actually an image image JPEG, and the grayscale will make sure whatever we receive in the upload file, it will be saved as a JPEG. If the user is not found, then again we will throw this, or we will catch this entity not found and return not found. So you've probably noticed by now that I'm catching this entity not found a whole lot in different controllers and actions, and whenever we do this we can use filters instead. So let me just take you to this exception filter I have here. Basically, whenever you have an exception thrown in an action, we can intercept this and check, is this an exception that we know how to handle, and if it is, then let's handle it in some different way. And here I'm checking that whenever this entity not found is thrown, we will return a status of 404 not found, and otherwise if it's any of the other exceptions that implement the application exception base, then we will return a 400 and we'll make sure that the message is passed back. So this allows us to remove logic like this. So if we just remove it like this and format it, and if we go into this login, I know we also had it right here. So there we go, and let me format that one. And then I also know we have it in the articles right here. Oh, that was a bit too much. Like this. So these exception filters really allow you to make your code a whole lot cleaner, even if you know that this might throw. Then you can make the exception filters to intercept it and handle it exactly how you would like. So you can apply these exception filters in two different ways. One way is to use attributes, and here we can say service attribute or a service filter attribute and say type of application exception filter. This way, then any action on this controller will use this exception filter. But you can also do it a different way, which I've done it here, and that is to apply it globally. So on the add controllers, you can say add MVC options, and here I have added the filter globally. You've probably noticed this output formatter, and let's go into that one right now. So in the articles, I mentioned that we can have all articles displayed as either JSON or text CSV, and that is even without any formatting going on inside the action. So what I've done to make this work is I've created this CSV output formatter. It's essentially saying, okay, so whenever we have a request made with the accept header text / CSV, we will use this formatter to take the type here. Actually, we're first going to check, okay, so can we even convert this type to CSV? And what I'm doing here is the type that I'm receiving, you notice that it's an enumerable of ICSV serializable. When we go into the articles controller, this one will actually return a list of articles. So that matches with the interface that we're checking for here. So this will return true for articles, and if we would do the same for users, it would return false. But for this, we're just going to do it with articles. And then inside this write response body, I can now safely cast the object I'm receiving to an enumerable of ICSV serializable. And what I do here is I just grab the property names and make that the header, and then for every item inside this list, I'll say to CSV, and we'll just write the response to the body. If we go into the articles, we can see that get CSV properties, we'll just use the user ID and time published, and to CSV we will just get the object represented as a CSV row, and that's actually it. And the way you wire it up is, as you've already seen here, with a global output formatters filter. And I just remembered that I forgot to show how this bearer token authentication is actually done. And what you want to do is just say add authentication, and you need this NuGet package authentication.bearer or JVT bearer. After that, you have to set up the token validation parameters, and because we're using a symmetric key, I'll use the same private key that we generated the tokens with. You can also do this with asymmetric, but it's a slightly different process. I have an article about that I can link in the description. But otherwise, you need this authentication type, so it will be bearer. Then you can do some validations on the token itself, if it has expired, who the issuer is, and who the audience is, and all this. I've just set it to false because this is demo code and it's easier, not as much code that I need to write. The last thing you need to do is to have this use authentication above the use authorization, and that should be all. All right, now on to the very last part. So that is our background service. Let me just get into it up here. So a background service is essentially just a very normal class. The only thing you do to it is inherit this background service, and that is it. There are some things you need to know about it, and you don't use your dependency injection here or the regular dependency injection. You need to have a dependency on the iService provider if you want to use any outside services, and you need to override this execute async. What we do here is we just check if our staging folder that we have defined up here, if that exists. If it doesn't, let's create it, and then we have a file watcher that is looking at that folder, and it will fire an event every time a new file is created inside that folder or any subfolder. Our event here, let's get into that one. So here a bit more stuff is happening. First off, we're trying to open the file, and I have to use a try catch here because the process that is creating the file might not be finished writing to the file when we try to open it, and then it will throw IO exception, and we need to catch that and take that into account. If it's released from the other process, then we can begin to process it, and we will wrap it in that inside a bitmap so that we can perform graphics operations on it. Then we're gonna grayscale it. I'm gonna show you how that is done in a second. Then we need the username or the user ID from the path, because you remember when we were, let me just go back into this one, when we are storing the profile image, we will create a new file name for it. So we use the username, then dash and a GUID, and then dot file extension. So yeah, that's the name of the file that we save. So that will also be the name of the file that we receive here. So we know the very first part is actually our username, and that's what we are trying to extract here. I'm not going to go into this code, but it works, and you can try that out for yourself. Anyway, when the image has been grayscaled, we will save it to a memory stream. We will grab the bytes from this memory stream and update the user profile image. So let's just go into this one. So here you see the iService provider, and we just create a scope for it. Then we request the user repository. We use the user ID, take this byte array and store that as the profile image, because that's also a byte array. The users then update it. And this is actually how you handle files with EF Core, and how you can store profile images and such. Okay, so onto this grayscale thing. The code here is not very pretty. All it's doing is essentially it will loop through every pixel in an image. It will calculate the new color for that exact pixel, so it will take out some color from it, and then we set the new pixel color to this grayscale. And I see that I've spelled this wrong. Oh my god, so much. Let's just do this. Come on. Yeah, there we go. That will work. This is how you create background services. The only thing you then need to do is you have to register it with your dependency injection framework, and I have not done it here. I've done it inside the program CS. So what you can do here is just say configure services and say add hosted service, and you pass in the type of your background service. Then it will actually start this one up whenever you start your web application. You can find the code here at this link, and I hope you liked it. This was obviously not a code along, it was more like what's possible for intermediate and beginner developers.